Good afternoon, citizens. Welcome to the second episode of In Black and White. I'm Lizole and I'm with Gerald Blanche, and we've got a very special guest today in Henry Shai, will obviously we will be engaging with today with a couple of questions, BPO questions, issues affecting everyday South Africans, and quite a widespread of what we can discuss. Thank you.
Cool. So, Henry, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on. I mean, I've known, well, I think we bumped into each other briefly at Merchants for a short period of time. And I think more recently, you were leading some operations for another outsourcer based in the USA where we were both working for the same client at a point in time. So, I mean, over to you. Just give us a quick rundown of who you are, where you've been, and what you're up to.
Hi, Lisa. I think, yeah, man, it's been some time. It's almost two decades in the BPO space. Kicked it off, as you said, within the South African space. We had a stint in Merchants. I remember back in the day, first trip to Cape Town was quite insightful, and having worked with you for me was, I think, at that point, something that really gave me the confidence around this is the space to grow. I've had a stint in Jamaica and had that international market exposure, which really sort of defined Henry Shai and who he is from a BPO perspective. Now a more seasoned executive, I think, with that exposure, and overall, just as an individual, for me, what has kept me in the space and with the international exposure really has been the drive towards being impactful. My focus really being building high performance teams, creating a trust with clients. And I think that's an element that's here, and we'll probably touch into it as we go forward. Being able to focus and deliver measurable results with the passion of people, because this industry is really about the people that we lead on a day-to-day basis. And that's who Henry is. And really having come through the ranks within the space, that has been quite instrumental for me.
Oh, thanks, Henry. I think that's a good rundown. Obviously, as we unpack a few more of the questions during this episode, you'll be able to elaborate on some of what you've just touched on. Liz, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Henry, for that introduction. Obviously giving some of us an idea in terms of your experience, in terms of both locally and offshore. And I think based on what you touched on in your introduction, as you said, you had a stint in Jamaica, so you were obviously exposed to a different demographic in terms of in terms of agents as compared to South African agent. And I think that the second point leads quite nicely into that, because I think my way I want to pick your brain is the issue around agents here in South Africa. We do, depending in terms of which BPO operation you are on, and I think mostly around our US based BPOs, around things like working hours and all of those things. We've got, as you would know, we've got your high attrition, we've got problems with payday absence, and we've got transport instability, late shift hours and all of those things. And I just want you to sort of like give us in terms of what your take is, and maybe focus just maybe on 2 points. I think the first one: are we dealing with a discipline problem here, or are we dealing with a management system problem?
I think that's a very good question around, I think the first thing, whilst we want to break it down into two, is the operational hours. So if you look at your nearshore outsourcer, they have the advantage of being closely aligned to the time zone, which then gives the nearshore BPOs that added advantage, because the time zone is basically the same. And if there is, your daylight saving, it's normally literally just an hour in or an hour out. So that's one advantage that, from a nearshore perspective, you have. But I think if we look at the attrition, your payday absence within the South African space, and how we can, or what seems to be the major challenge is, yes, the operational hours are a challenge, because now you're looking at when recruiting, you need to look at somebody who truly is committed to working those odd hours, right? And how you then mitigate your attrition, your absence, your payday absence is really being more engaged. Because, a lot of individuals don't want to be away from their families at that point in time during those hours that we, from an SA perspective, operate. So it's key that your leadership, from your team leader to your executives, understand that you need to engage these individuals. You need to make them feel that it's daytime for them. And daytime doesn't only speak within the office space. You need to be able to, you mentioned things like transportation, having reliable transport that's going to get the individual at home, engaging with your staff in terms of understanding, have they got solid family support, family structure, in terms of, if you come home at 3 a.m., are you still expected to wake up at 7 and get your child ready? Those are the impacts that businesses, and I think with the little stint that I've just had now as I'm back in South Africa with the BPOs, is we only think of, we pick you up, we drop you home. So, our responsibility sort of ends there. But the diversity part of it is the impact that, if I'm a single parent, and I think that's the difference within the South African space and the Caribbean space. What I found is, and in the same space, Jared, as you had mentioned, that we had worked with, we had we had one or two UK clients, and what we did to ensure that the attrition and absence is managed was to look at how do we facilitate the after work issues that the staff have that are working the UK hours. So to facilitate that was to have a sort of an aftercare facility, and also giving out a premium for them to be able to afford an after hours nanny. So again, it's a management mindset that needs to be changed from the leaders on how we engage our people in order for them to also feel important in managing those, in covering those hours. Because really and truly, absence and attrition, when compared between, the Caribbean, and it's a dynamic that every market has. However, it's how you engage. It's your engagement that really drives it. And also creating a culture of not being managers, but being leaders. And I find in the small stint that I've had is that there's a culture of I am your manager, and it ends there. I tell you, and that's it. Within the Caribbean space, one of their key strengths, they are in the, I would say everybody's sort of brought up in a hospitality type of space, and you see it with the leadership. Whilst the sector is young, the leaders embrace, it's a family type of approach. It's we're all hands on. I understand where you're coming from, and you understand where I come from. So it's a complementing system where we complement each other, we understand, and leaders at team leaders level are given that opportunity to take those decisive decisions to say, okay, I know you stay in Flanker, which is a rough area in Montego Bay. So how do I ensure that you are in on time, you're not absent? So let me work with workforce. Let's get you an earlier shift because your area is, so there's that partnership, which I find that from a South African space, I think we overlook, and we say we're giving you transport, and that's it. But we forget about the other side of, once the employee is out of our space, have they got the support?
Thanks, Gerald. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so look, Henry. I mean, I think we can agree that the hours are probably the driver for the South African environment. But I think there's a reality here where all of the things you've mentioned are very nice. But I'll give you an example. Somebody taking Lazole and then understanding his very specific challenge at home with regard to having 5 kids and nobody during the day, and then accommodating him leads to a chain reaction where you now need to accommodate everybody, and there's a level of jealousy. My view is not a popular view, but I'm going to say it how it is. The youth unemployment market or situation in South Africa is around 60%. Now, if you put an advert out for any jobs, you are going to get a number of CVs. Everybody's looking for a job. And strangely enough, the people that are looking for jobs are people with BPO experience already. They're running away from something. Now, I believe solving the absence issue, potentially, well, as a result of the absence, the attrition issue is trying to get a round peg into a round hole rather than a square peg into a round hole, because people are coming into interviews and promising you the earth. But the reality is, for all of the reasons you've described, family support systems, unique situations at home, they actually can't work night shift hours because they don't have the support. So, I know I wouldn't be suited to night shift at this point in time. I just wouldn't. If I needed a job, I might be tempted to mislead the employer and try and force myself to work night shifts, but the wheels inevitably fall off. A couple of weeks down the line, I can't handle the shifts. I'm unhappy. I start making people around me unhappy. And I just think that we're dealing with a situation where people are desperate for work. I get that. I believe our recruitment processes aren't robust enough to make sure we're getting people that are actually suited. I also believe the labor regulations around being able to investigate somebody's track record at their previous employer is prohibitive. You're not allowed to question whether Lazole was a great worker or a terrible worker to that extent when you're querying previous employers. So, we've got a real challenge, but the bottom line is we're getting people into our operations that are not suitable. It's not 100% of the time. It only takes 20% of the people in your operation to mess things up, because that's pretty much the absence rate that you're dealing with in an offshore campaign. Not everybody's bad. It's just 20% of the time there's a problem. And of that 20%, I would say more than half of the people inside that 20% are serial offenders. So there's definitely an issue in terms of ramping up these big international campaigns and trying to fill quotas and get bums on seats and letting the wrong people in the door. Even if you get it down to 10% of the guys not being suitable, that 10% can destroy you. The other element is I also think South Africa tries too hard from the get-go to sprint and optimize their operations to become profitable in the shortest period of time, rather than saying we're going to have to overstaff so that we can give our guys in their first 90 days some level of stability, make sure that there's a fair number of weekends off, that there's fairness. I think the issue is not so much trying to create a unique shift for Lazole because of his particular issue. The issue we're seeing is the workforce management, and I've seen this in two major outsources over the last while, over a period of let's call it 6 years. I've really studied this whole attrition and absence problem and what drives it, and it will always come down to one thing. Number one, the recruitment team misled people around what the hours and benefits, and people didn't understand what the top up was for out of sociable hours workies. And number two, the workforce management team tries to schedule people as if it was a BAU operation, and you'll find it's too extreme for a new campaign. It doesn't give people a chance to acclimatize, and then over time we start losing track over the rotation, and people don't rotate, they don't get enough weekends off, they don't get consecutive days off. So to me, missed expectations, and that goes down to a recruitment and screening issue. And then, the workforce management guys, or the way we've staffed in terms of numbers and scheduled, starts creating problems. And once you set the house on fire, within that initial period of the campaign, it's very hard to put that fire out. You'll find things quickly spiral out of control. American clients are very impatient. Once your 90 days is up and the honeymoon's over, the hiding starts. And, that's just been my personal take. But everything you've said, in a perfect world, I would love to agree with. It's just, at what point do we say, hang on a second, if I'm bringing on so many special needs people into the business, are we recruiting correctly, and have we got the right employee profile? I shouldn't be in a situation where I have to create all of these exceptions to run my business. There's a 60% unemployment rate. I have the luxury of choosing the tallest dwarf. But that's my personal opinion. And as I said, it's going to be unpopular.
Yeah. And I think to some degree, Gerald, in some of the parts that you've said, I agree with some of what you had said. And I think, as you say, we've got a 60% unemployment rate. And with such a huge unemployment rate, you will have that bulk of individuals that come in and promise you the world. And I think, where I agree with you again is the businesses not automatically just going quick for being operationally profitable without giving themselves a chance to truly see how the campaign would actually go. But I think the other, for me, the key thing is, and you mentioned it briefly, is within the 20%, if we can reduce that 20 to 10, but also be flexible for that additional 10 to be able to say, people will come in with a high unemployment, people will come in and they'll give you everything that you say, I need somebody to be here. They will constantly do that. But once you reduce that 10% absence issue to 10%, sorry, the 20% to 10, it is now key for your leadership, which is where I find the difference. Workforce is instrumental in how they can flex within the schedules, but your leaders then become your natural coaches and natural mentors. For me, having seen how team leaders within the Jamaican space would work, is they would personally connect with those individuals that are giving challenges from an attendance perspective, and by so doing, you're able to cut the 10 to about a 7%, and then you manage it out. You would manage your 7% out. But it's really, for me, a matter of being able to connect and how you engage with those individuals that are problematic whilst looking at doing exceptions for them. It's really, I think, from a South African perspective, yes, we need to look at the family dynamics. We need to be able to, from a recruitment space, be able to assess and see, if you're a single parent of three, what's the probability of you giving us a problem in 2 months? You also need to look at the distance from where the people are being recruited from. For an example, if you look at Cape Town, so you need to look at where's your center based and how far is where you're recruiting from. So all of those dynamics, and how do you truly enable your leaders to connect and have the agent population feeling that there's a commitment. I think in our experience, you would say, Jared, there's a team where you knew in your operation you could rely on, a set number of people, and it wasn't created by those individuals just being a strong amount of people. It was created by the leader that they had, because they would then commit to that leader. And that's where I find a gap within the South African sort of team leader to OM level. They aren't able to get their teams to say, Jared is on vacation as our team leader. We are going to make sure that he comes back, he gets the props. It shows his leadership style. It shows that he doesn't just tell us what we do to do. We do it with him. And I find that that's another gap that we have.
That's a good point, Henry. I think maybe let me just take you back a bit. You mentioned in terms of in Jamaica, there's almost that hospitality culture. And the thing is, and I think we have to be honest with the South African market. And this comes from someone who has been an agent as well. We do tend to have a culture of we doing you a favor. So we
Yeah.
really do not have we don't have that culture of partnering with our agents, almost connect with them. And I was an agent 15, 18 years ago, and I did not want to let my team down or my team leader down. Secondly, is business in terms of, and I don't want to touch, I'm not a big fan of remuneration and all of these things, right? But we have to understand that if we are talking to Lizole, who was an agent back in 2007, where our GDP was growing annually on average at 4.3, and you're basically talking to agents now that are almost in a recession. You've got people, there's a reality, and especially amongst the black families, there's a reality that the 6,000 rands that I'm getting as a call center agent has to support extended family. That 60% does not just apply on the street, it applies at home. You've got a brother and a sister who's sitting at home who is not working, and everyone, most of our families are on social grants, and people, the remuneration structure, I just feel personally, is not enough. Now, do we have the right skill set, and is that skill set being remunerated? That's a topic for another day. But yeah, I just want us to touch on those things in terms of we do know that these guys have got not just their kids, they've got extended families to support, and are we, having looked at in 2025, you still have got Gerald agents that are being paid 6.5 a month, and that's what I was getting paid in 2008 in Carphone Warehouse. I was earning as a Quest agent. I was earning 6,000 rands a month as well. Yeah. Can I just throw that to you, gents?
Yeah, so Liz, I think the remuneration thing is a red herring because, over the last 7 years, I've been on operations where the salary is certainly not 6,500. Starting salaries, particularly the last stint I looked at in Cape Town, you've got people coming in on around about 8,000 plus their transport, plus the ability to earn incentives. Very low KPIs to qualify for incentives. Literally, just please come to work 95%, or in fact, they even dropped it 90% of the time. And you could easily add another 500. And once you cross that gate, achieving your sort of NPS and that, you could get yourself, if you were just a decent citizen, to 9,500. Plus you had a degree of medical cover, you had amazing facilities on site. And let me tell you, that money compared to the 6,500, I wonder sometimes if it's not better to pay people less, because it's simply, the more you pay people, it seemed it didn't change behavior. I mean, there were crazy incentive schemes being thrown at people in order to try and just get people to work. In Cape Town, particularly, my experience is it's out of hand. It's really out of control. And because of the proximity of BPO operators, you can get fired from one, and tomorrow there's an open day at the next one. You just walk around like a migrant laborer. So there's no consequence really for misbehavior or being a poor agent, but the money's there. People have the opportunity to really, as a starting salary, or even if it's your second job, to address the problem you're describing, Liz, it can help families if they see it. So I guess to Henry's earlier point, there is a missing ingredient. A lot of these guys that are misbehaving are smart guys. They do well in their sort of screening tests when it comes to their technical ability. They've been through all the training. Most of them have either been through merchants or teleperformance or what have you. They've all worked on offshore campaigns. They've got all of that, that grounding. They know how to do the job, but the behavior goes wrong. And part of that behavior problem is, I think, poor leadership. And when I talk about consequence management, I don't talk about let's pull out the stick. Let's talk about consequences in terms of the impact to, the team and your career path and your opportunity. Because I think at the end of the day, nobody starts out working to say, gosh, I want to be a call center agent for the rest of my life. Look, there are people, they're exceptional. They're probably in the 0.5%. And I've met one or two that all they want in life is to be a great call center agent. But most people want to progress. And I think if you map it out and you kind of indicate to people, listen, you should set yourself a target of, you shouldn't be an agent for longer than 2 years. And in that 2 years, you'll gain all the knowledge around how to deal with customers, the client that you're servicing, the systems that you're working with. Steal the knowledge, take the knowledge, eat up all of the free courses that are available, take that and get out. Go and pursue a doctorate, go and pursue marketing, go and do whatever. But while you're here for those 2 years, please give me your best and I'll remunerate you fairly. So there are a couple of ingredients that are missing. Money doesn't solve the problem. I've seen that with my own eyes. Where I've seen things make a difference is in the shifts. If the shifts are, I think, more pleasant, consecutive days off, air rotation, all of those good things. And I've seen it in occupancy. On high occupancy accounts, people are far more absent, leave. And I get it. You come to work and you just get abused call after call, particularly on some of these clients. They're expecting, and their whole focus on NPS is they punish you with NPS because they want you to compensate for the lack of product stability or service stability or just usability. You as the front line or the first line of defense, taking the kicks and the bullets on behalf of the client, and God help you if you get it wrong, because your NPS score goes down the drain and you get beaten up for poor NPS and you get put on pips and all kinds of things. So, those are the things that I think we're not talking about. And I think it's a whole new series of episodes that we can sit and talk about. But I think the thing I wanted to get from Henry was, are there differences? I think there are. And I think some of those differences are driven by the geography and the maturity in other regions that South Africa perhaps hasn't got their head around. I think there's a lot we can do on the basics to set ourselves up from the start to have a winning campaign. And we only start doing those things when the house is on fire. And then it's too late. We only start thinking about added incentives. Oh, let's fix your shifts. Let's put in fair rotation. That's when you've already got people that are in your system that are very disgruntled, and nothing's going to talk them off the ledge. The only thing that's going to talk them off is the next job that's more attractive than the one they're in. Or if you now start progressive discipline and work them out of the system. But bearing in mind, you probably created the problem that you're facing simply because you didn't do it from the start. And that's, again, just, my experience is we don't do the right things from the beginning. We do the right things when it's too late.
True. Just to add on that, Jared, I think I agree with you. I find that we give this huge positive picture, and when the people come out of training into BAU, it's a totally different ballgame. And I think we miss it there as operations and as organizations overall. And that's where, for me, I think the difference is that I've seen a number of nesting classes that happen in the South African space as I've come back. But when I compare it to the sort of the Caribbean way of doing things, yes, you've got that nesting space, and it's beyond just nesting around product. It's truly the leader taking charge and getting into that. Let me get you to commit to me as I commit to you. So that coaching culture is very, very strong, where you find agents when you do your sort of town halls or sessions as a senior exec, you hear agents saying, my team leader, Henry, spent so much time that, even lunchtime, he gets us together. He sits with us. He walks us through the product. But beyond that, he wants to understand how we feel. I did a very in the last BPO that I had was with in Kingston. I did a the what's it called, Scott Hodge thing as you come into the center, right? And then you had two faces at the door. Which face are you coming in with? Are you in a happy face or sort of not in the best of mood? And that on its own, because the guys came in and did the hot Scott 1 2 5 1 2. By the time they hit the door, they've either remembered what the issues are at home, or you've made them feel, yeah, man, I'm at work. I did this. Let me go in. And that was basic, but it allowed the team leaders to know in their teams of 15, how many of my people can I rely on in the first hour, right? And who do I need to focus on because they are not in the best space? And that's what we miss. I think we've got all these other dynamics, but again, it's just making the environment. Let's be honest from the get-go. You're coming into an airline campaign. There's days where it's crazy. It's now the winter season. It's hurricane season. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be flight delays. There's all these things that are out of our control. Are you that type of person that can sit for 8-9 hours consistently with customers, American customers that are saying, I need to be home? Are you able to take that? So those are the type of stress levels we need to ensure that prior to these guys even going into the production floor are well aware of the type of person. And I think that's where the Caribbean guys have got a much more better advantage as well, is because they're close to the US. They understand that market very closely. They've got family members that are based in the US. For them, it's not a huge cultural change. What I've seen in South Africa is there is that gap still of us trying. We know America as 21 Jump Street, the series that we watched, right? We see America as, yo, man, and all this. We don't know the actual American culture and just the normal person, So there's a lot that I think we can do as leaders just before you transition these guys over to avoid your attrition, your bad behaviors and that negativeness, as you had mentioned, Jared, in 6 months, that in that 60 days, sorry, in that 60 days, where the agent is now going, do I really want to be here? And you've invested so much.
Yep, Henry, 100%. I think, the thing in my experience that I've kind of saw, and again, it wasn't that in one operation, it's across a couple of years and in different geographies, is if you can crack the first 90 days of an agent's life within your business, once you get them to stick around for that first 90 days, it becomes so much easier to retain them. But our problem is that almost 45 to 50% of all of your attrition on a monthly basis is coming from people that have been with your business for less than 90 days. And that tells me there are a number of things that are wrong. Those things are, again, your recruitment, your training, your nesting program, and your leaders. But I think, Henry, we've got some key learnings out of your experience and your answer. And I think we're definitely going to have you back for another episode where we can unpack some of these things, because it's absolutely, I love talking about this stuff and I love sharing experiences, particularly with somebody from South Africa who spent so much time in a different geography and being able to compare notes. But before we wrap up, I think we have one final question for you, which is, Henry, you're back in South Africa. What are your plans? What are you up to? Where are you going next? What's next for Henry? I'm sure people are kind of excited, well, I am at least, to understand how you're going to bring those experiences from across the ocean and bring these to South Africa and do something different and so that the local industry can maybe learn from you, or maybe you can shake things up a little bit, because I think we're all caught up in, if you look at the BPSs and all of the industries, we're all drinking the same Kool-Aid at the moment, and everybody's, I feel the whole industry's in a bit of a rut, and we need to do something differently. Until we address the problems of attrition, absence, we're not addressing quality and better service, because people are not sticking around long enough. Your talent is walking out the door, your experience walks out the door when you have an attrition problem. So what is the plan for Henry, and are you still going to be in the BPO space? And if so, what are you going to do different?
Yeah, well, I think for me, the plan is really, my future is looking at, continuing within the BPO space and sharing as what we've started doing, Jared, in terms of my exposure internationally and being able to drive and be instrumental within the space. It's really focusing on the digital transformation. I think that's an area that is coming in. A lot of people are scared about, and looking at how AI can assist us from an analytical perspective. It can never take over humans. I'm also hoping to bring in the leadership development approach that I got to see within the Caribbean space, which is really building a pipeline of future leaders and bringing in that hospitality aspect. We used to call it the white glove service, back into the space, and maybe rebuild that within the South African space, and also looking at how do we scale that leadership capability. We've got a whole lot of leaders, very strong leaders within South Africa, but I think the fundamental that really gives us true, we need more of servant leaders, people that lead from behind, allowing our leaders to take charge, and also looking at how do I grow that within the space of our country. Let's try and partner the sector.
Thanks, Henry, for that, man. And I think I share Gerald's sentiments in terms of, I think we just don't have enough time, to go through everything that we would like to go through, So I do see as a necessity and another episode to sort of like unpack, especially around the culture part, in terms of learning from the other countries in terms of how they do it. I actually do think that as South Africans, we can benefit from that. And I say that as one of those leaders who have sort of like worn both hats. I've tried to be more coaching. I've tried to be more sort of like aggressive and all of those things, in dealing with this pandemic we have. So I really do appreciate you sharing that. And I think maybe just touching on parting shots, you know, touch a bit, please, on the South African foreign policy, and how you feel that has an impact in terms of on the industry as a whole, as a BPO. Case in point, South Africa and US strained relations at the moment, and how would that potentially maybe have an impact on our industry?
Okay, I think that's a very good and intense question, because we all look at what's happening in the news and the relationship between the US and South Africa. For me, I think foreign policy will always have a ripple effect. We look at the US as the first world country where most of our business comes in, and when they do something, it has a global impact. The key thing, whilst the foreign policy is out there, it's for the BPO sector to look at clients, because what clients will look at where can they maximize their revenue. Right. Whilst there might be the issue around SA, US trade and so forth, the clients still need to make money. And it has shown throughout the years that, yes, you've got your Philippines who are cost effective, you've got your Indias, but they still have that strong accent. And South Africa's advantage is we've got the neutral accent. So clients will firstly look at stability, predictability, and trust. is what they'll look at in terms of when they're looking at an outsourcing destination. Whilst there is that difference, I think for me, our US clients have found that from a South African perspective, we can deliver. We are matured enough. Yes, we've got issues around attrition, but the accent, and I'll use Cape Town as a point. Cape Town as a tourist point has created that trust within the US tourist market, which is your big guys, your business owners, your decision makers. So for me, foreign policy, as I say, you have to view it in that, yes, it will have some replica effect. It's for BPO leaders and owners and the management team to ensure that every interaction and engagement that we have with our clients creates that trust and comfort to say, yes, there might be that political clout that we all have, but at the same time, these guys that I'm dealing with are giving me that comfort and security to say my business is in the right hands and I can grow with it. Not going into too much politics, because as they say, politics are not for those that are not strong. But if we look at the current India-US tie and the bone of contention around the purchasing of the Russia oil and the debate around Modi saying, well, you're saying we shouldn't purchase oil from Russia, but you guys are still fueling certain things in your space. So that's for politicians. Business will still be business, but it's all about the sector showing its stability. Let us be predictable in terms of delivery, and also let the clients trust us as BPO, so they can still afford us those opportunities to grow.
Thank you for your time, Hendry. Really appreciate it. I've learned quite a bit, in terms of, as well as a player in the BPO space as well, maybe in terms of what we need to focus on, in terms of maybe focus on the human side of things, so thank you very much for that. We really appreciate your time, sir. Gerald?
Henry, thanks a lot. And yeah, welcome back to SA. We're definitely going to have you back on for a follow-up episode. But yeah, I think, keep in touch. Let us know what you're up to. Let's try and form a little, I suppose, a think tank around how we solve some of the problems. I think there is a lot of opportunity in South Africa, particularly if we address the leadership gaps, getting recruitment right. And I think most importantly, how do we tackle that first 90 days to set the right tone and get businesses focused more around the people rather than necessarily treating people like a commodity. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Henry, and good luck with your next steps.
No, thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to the next